Hello and welcome to another episode of Mr. Walker's APES. Today we're going to cover population dynamics, carrying capacity, and talk a little bit about conservation biology. So some of these words might seem familiar to you, some may be completely foreign. Basically, to break this down, this is just how do populations change? Okay, that's what dynamic means. It means it's changing. All right, and of course with conservation biology we're thinking about how can we preserve populations. Okay, so first just some objectives. What should you know by the end of this? Really what I'm looking for in an AP class is your ability to analyze. Okay, that's the key word here. You need to be able to analyze things that affect population. So don't just tell me, amount of food is going to affect population. Analyze it. How is food going to affect the population of deer? Well, then how is the population of deer going to affect the population of wolves? All right. Really get in depth and analyze these things. So I'm going to provide you with some examples. And then these are some keywords: R selected and K selected species. And it's really simple. It's the difference between a cockroach and an elephant, essentially. And we're going to get into detail on those. And I didn't put it up here, so let me go ahead and I'll type it in now. You should know and explain what a survivorship curve is. Okay, so we're going to be looking at lots of graphs here to find out what a survivorship curve is. Alright, so first right into population dynamics here. Again, these are things that affect population, but you need to be able to analyze these. So population size, okay, if I say population size, I'm talking about just the number of individuals. What is the population of the classroom? What is the population of the school, population of the town, etc.? You're familiar with that. That's population size. Density is how many are in an area. Okay? So if I'm talking about a classroom, that's pretty easy. I could just say, okay, the size of this classroom is blank, and there are blank number of students in this classroom, so my density is blank number of students per whatever area the classroom is. All right, and this is important for figuring out population distribution or dispersion. So how clumped up are they? Are they spread out all over the place? Are they, what are they? And I think in one of the other videos I had shown you a picture of clumping. That was the elephants. They all clump up into little groups. Uniform dispersion like the creosote plants in the desert, or random dispersion like the dandelions. All right. So if we know the density, then it's easy to figure out the dispersion as well. And usually you'll see density marked on a graph. You see it a lot with humans, with population density. You'll have like the circles or some symbol to represent density. So if you look over like New York City, you usually have like a really big circle because New York City is very dense. And if you look over West Virginia, it's really hardly any circles because West Virginia is not very dense. Those sorts of things. And then age distribution. So how many people are there at each age group? How many people are below the age of 5? How many are below 10, 20, So we'll look at some graphs when we do human population. We're going to look at some age distribution graphs or pyramids. So the first thing that we're going to really look at with this whole population dynamics is a new word possibly to a lot of you guys. It's called carrying capacity. So carrying capacity is the number of individuals that can be sustained in an area. I say area or volume here because if we're talking about people, we're going to look at an area. If we're talking about fish, we're going to look at a volume. Okay, how big of a fish tank do I need to support my catfish at home? That's a volume. Gallons is volume. How many square feet do I need to support a family of 5? So what size house do I need? Okay, those sorts of things. And this is to sustain indefinitely. Okay, so assuming there is, natural predation, natural death, natural birth, all those sort of things. How much space do we need to support them? And so we're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to be looking at biotic and abiotic factors, but here I just want to talk about biotic intrinsic rate of growth. Okay, this is how fast a species will grow with unlimited resources. Okay, so if I gave a bunch of mice, unlimited cheese, how long would they live? And how fast would they grow? Simple enough. Environmental resistance is all the things that limit the growth. So of course, most species would grow exponentially and indefinitely if there was no environmental resistance. Of course, humans have overcome this. Humans have overcome environmental resistance. So we are growing exponentially. We are growing at our biotic potential, or intrinsic rate of growth, because we have at present what seem to be an unlimited amount of resources and an indefinite amount of time. That's changing, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot in this class. Okay, so of course other animals have lots of environmental resistance. Disease is something that doesn't affect humans as much anymore, but disease, infant mortality, shelter, okay, something as simple as shelter. Most humans have a ready access to shelter. Okay, so if we were looking at carrying capacity, which again is how many can live in an area, what given resistance, given how much resources there are, how many can live there, we often see this as a graph. Okay, and so I've got the elephant and the cockroach here, and a carrying capacity curve. This is not a curve, this could be a curve for any species, so pick which one you like the most and apply it. There were things I cut out of this image that we're going to look at later. So you can see here, you've got a nice curve. All right, so if we have a population starting with that's a rhinoceros. Two rhinoceroses, an elephant. Two rhinos down here. They're going to have a baby, maybe two babies. So it takes a little while to get growing. So it's slow to start, but then once you have a whole bunch of individuals, you can start growing a lot faster. So you're going to grow and grow and grow and grow, and eventually you're going to reach this upper limit where you're going to have so many individual rhinoceroses that you can't. There's not enough food or water or space or shelter or whatever it is that they need. Then they start to level off, and you start to have death equal birth. So when you have a carrying capacity level off, that's where death equals birth. You're having as many die as you have born, so your population steadies out. So, this is something that is pretty common, where you've got, your biotic potential, how many can be born, and your environmental resistance, how much food, how much disease, how much, etc. Now, I do want to point out this is ideal. All books kind of show an ideal graphic where you have this nice S-shaped curve. And you may see this on the AP exam, you may not, but just because I like to give you a whole education and show you what the world is really like, this curve you will never, I won't say never, you will rarely see in the real world. In fact, what mostly happens is that your population overshoots its carrying capacity. You have lots and lots of individuals being born and not very many dying off. Well, within a generation or so, you quickly realize that you're out of food. And so a lot die. And so this curve would do more something like, let me see if I can get some sort of drawing tool here. It would go up. Hold on, I've got to set it to a black line or something. Anyway, it would go up and then come back down and collapse and then come up, and it would wave back and forth until it eventually reached where it needs to be. Okay, so that's what we're talking about there. All right, so you've got this S shape is ideal. In reality, it comes up and it waves back and forth until it eventually levels out. And that's what will likely happen to humans. Okay, so here's a critical thinking question for you. Are we at carrying capacity? Are we above carrying capacity? Or have we not yet reached our carrying capacity? And what do you think will happen between now and when we do reach carrying capacity, if we have not yet reached it? Or if we have already reached it, what's the imminent outcome? What will happen? Okay. One more vocab word for you. When we go above carrying capacity and fall back down, it's called a die-off. Makes sense, right? Lots of things die, so it's called a die-off. If the population is hardy and can recover, it will go up. If it doesn't, it will collapse, and you have a nice little bell-shaped curve where that population used to exist and no longer does. So what are some things that can affect population growth? There are lots of things that can affect population growth, both biotic and abiotic. So when I say biotic, that means things that are living, that affect how, or have to do with life, that affect how many individuals you can have. Abiotic are things that Earth provides, essentially, things that are non-living, things that cannot be produced from life. So here are lots of examples. Biotic, reproductive rate. You have to have life to reproduce, so reproductive rate. The niche, where do you live? What's your role in the environment? That's a biotic thing. All right, rocks don't really have a niche in life, Support, food supply, okay, biotic. We're usually eating other life. We don't eat rocks. The habitat, competitors, prey, disease, ability to adapt. All of those are biotic factors. Those are things that are affected by life, bio-life, okay? Abiotic, meaning not life. The light. If you're a plant and you have lots of light, that might be good, might be bad, okay? Some plants don't need a lot of light. So the light has nothing to do with life. That comes from the sun. That is an abiotic factor that affects the populations of plants. All right, populations of plants affect other species, so that's an abiotic factor. Temperature. Humans can live comfortably between about 45 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit. If you go much below that, you start risking hypothermia. If you go above that, you start risking hyperthermia, which is not something a lot of people talk about, but hyperthermia sets in around 145 degrees, assuming no humidity. And then, of course, nutrient availability. This is, again, an abiotic factor. Nutrients are chemicals, so, they're not alive. They don't come from life. We usually get them through eating things, okay, so you look over here at food supply, but you can get them from eating a multivitamin. We give multivitamins to our pets and things, so that didn't come from any life. Nutrients are just chemicals. They synthesize them and put them into little tabs for us to eat. In nature, if I don't know if you guys have ever seen, but maybe if you go out to Chincoteague Island, where the ponies are on the eastern shore, if you look carefully, sometimes you'll see them licking rocks, and what they're doing there is they're trying to get a nutrient that's not in their food, usually salt. So they're licking the rock to get ocean salt into their body. So all these things play into population size. So I've got this neat little graphic here that shows, okay, you've got things that have biotic potential, things that increase growth, and they're trying to increase the population. And then you have environmental resistance, which decreases the population. So they're constantly fighting in this struggle, going back and forth, back and forth. All right. So at any one time, growth might overcome environmental resistance, like with humans. So our arrow's way over here. But if you're, a rabid raccoon or something, okay, the environmental resistance is pushing you back this way. So Lots of things. So again, look at the abiotic factors. Okay, if you have good light, that's going to help you grow. If you have too much or too little light, well, that's going to push you back the other way, and so on. So there's lots of examples here. So think about these things. This is where I want you to critically think about population dynamics. This is population dynamics. The population is changing. So what is affecting the change? How else is that playing into the overall environment, the overall habitat, the overall community? What's going on here? So how is that going to affect evolution or even just adaptation? Okay, think about it with your own self too. As much as humans are removed from the environment these days, how will no food in your refrigerator cause you to adapt? Okay, so think about these things. Two types of growth: exponential and logistic. Exponential begins slow and then just goes faster and faster and faster and faster. So it produces what looks like a J, or a backwards capital L or something. You know, it goes really slow and then it just shoots up. Let me try drawing again here, and maybe I can, if I can get it here, and we'll try and change the properties so that you guys can see it. Yeah, there we go. That's what I need. Alright. So if I have something that looks like this, okay, this is your exponential growth. It's kind of a crappy J, but you can see it just starts increasing and goes up and up and up and up and up and up forever. Logistic, or an S-shaped curve, that's like what you saw earlier on the carrying capacity, where you start off slow, then you go up, and then you level off again. Alright, so that's what that is. Sorry for all this, I'll have to get it all fixed for next time, but there you go. So this would be an S-shaped curve. Right? You have some exponential, but then you level off. What's the word there? A little mini quiz in the middle of the video. What's the word for the upper limits? Okay, keep that in mind. It's very important. Oh look, here I have them for you. Alright, exponential, logistic, simple enough. Okay, try and put a label on this dashed line. What's that going to be? Why is it there? Alright, so that covers size and growth of part of the dynamics. So density. Population density can be affected by a lot of things. Okay, again, this is how many do I have in an area or volume. Area for anything that lives on land, volume for anything that lives in water. Alright, so if I am density independent, okay, things that affect density that are not dependent on the density of my animals. Alright, so let's say I have 50 individuals per acre, and I'm looking at beavers. Okay, so I have 50 beavers per acre in some area. Things that affect that density that are not related to the beavers would be usually natural disasters. Okay, think about anything that's a natural disaster. Floods, fires, hurricanes, drought or excessive rain, habitat destruction, pesticide spraying. Okay, beavers did not cause any of these things. Alright, these are not caused by animals. So, they are independent of however many animals you have. I could have had 2 beavers per acre, or 10,000 beavers per acre. If they can survive on that, that's fine. But if a flood, fire, hurricane, something like that comes through, that's definitely going to change that population density. Now, things that are dependent. So once you see the contrast here, then I think it'll make more sense. If the beavers are all competing for the same resources, well, the more beavers you have, the more competition there is. Therefore, you're going to probably have more problems keeping that population up there. Alright? If I have lots of individuals, there's probably going to be a lot of predators moving in. They say, hey, easy food, okay? So predation might increase if you increase density. Parasitism and disease, okay, all of these things. Disease is one that really affects humans. the more dense the population of humans, the more likely the disease is to spread. And we'll do a little in-class activity with that. It's kind of neat. You get to see who gets infected and who doesn't. And we'll set up different scenarios. So, you could imagine, all right, you can even look back at the past, the Black Plague in Europe, okay, areas that were very densely populated, the cities of the time, a lot of the population was wiped out because the disease was spread by fleas. So the closer you are, the more likely the fleas are to jump onto you and infect you, and then you will die. So a lot of people fled to the country. They figured this out. They said, hey, if I'm not around other people, I can't get the fleas, I'm probably better off. So a lot of people spread out across Europe, and the cities became abandoned. So those are things. So keep in mind, density independent are your natural disasters or things not caused by the species itself, whereas density dependent is, the species is directly causing their own sort of demise or peril. All right. So we look down through here. We've got to talk about 2 vocabulary words. This is one of the objectives for the day. You need to know the difference between R-selected and K-selected species. So R-selected, think R for reproduction. These are things that are only limited by their reproduction cycle. It actually has nothing to do with reproduction, but R is what I like to think of. So R-selected species. These are usually pests. Things that we think of as weeds or pests, cockroaches, grasshoppers, flies, dandelions, things that have lots of offspring, don't care for them, and then die early. So they reproduce early. All right, so cockroaches have many thousands of offspring. They lay the eggs and then they leave. They don't care for them. They don't worry about it. Probably half of those won't even survive a day. Okay, they'll get eaten by birds and other things. Those that do survive will reproduce early because they don't live very long. So, they're going to basically be born, live or die to reproduction, reproduce, die. That's it. Okay. They can live in lots of different areas. They have a high population growth rate, and it fluctuates a lot. They usually don't ever stabilize at a carrying capacity. They either exceed it or they're below it, and there's not really anything in between. Not really competitive. They don't need to. They just have how they compete is that they have lots of babies. If you have lots of babies, you live longer. Your species survives longer. All right, so there you go. Early successional. So when we talked about succession earlier, these are the species that will move in first. Okay, so you go from the bare rock, you get the mosses, the lichens, you start getting a little soil, you're going to start having these guys move in. Insects, weeds, those sorts of things are going to move in first because they just have so many offspring, they're going to move right into a new area quickly. So K-selected, these are most mammals, some plants like the saguaro cactus. All right, these are species that are the exact opposite of R-selected. So they slow growth rate, few babies, care for their babies, long time to reproductive age, live a long time, usually reach carrying capacity or close to it, are competitive, are specialized, adapted to a stable climate. So elephants live in one climate, you move them around, they aren't going to do so well. All right, that sort of thing. Okay, so just think of elephants, think of humans, think of dogs, think of cats, all right? So humans, we are born helpless. Okay, we have to have parental care. If we don't have parental care, we die. We take over a decade to reach sexual maturity. Okay, in today's society, usually it's another decade before we even have a baby. So, and then when we do have a baby, we have one baby. That's not enough to replace us. We have to have many babies over our lifetime. So it's going to take a long time to replace us, at least 2 to 3 years to replace just you, the parents. All right. So that's why we live a long time. And so our population is going to grow very slowly. We're going to reach a carrying capacity. We may exceed it, we may not. Depends on what we do. So think about that. And then, of course, late successional. Because we are specialized, because we need all these other things to support us, we're going to move in way late. We're going to wait for the forest to be established before we even go near that environment, because we can't live off of weeds and rocks like lichens and insects can. Alright, so R selected, most insects and weeds grow fast, die young. K selected, slow growth, reach carrying capacity. That's why the K there. Okay. K for carrying capacity. Don't know why. Alright, so finally, survivorship curves. Survivorship curves just tell you within each age group how many individuals survive. Before we read all this text, let's look at the graph so that you understand what I'm talking about. Alright, so this is a survivorship curve. We've got a fish, a bird, and a rhino. So look at the fish. This is an early loss species. Why do you think it's early loss? Alright, so we've got percent surviving and the age. So think about what this graph means for a second. Okay. So if we look here, we look and we have age 1 day. Alright, we have 100% of our species survives for 1 day. Well, by the time we reach maybe a week, we've already lost 90% of our species. That's pretty crazy. Alright. So yeah, that's ridiculous. We've lost 90% within a few days. And think about that with the fish. Okay, they lay lots of eggs. They don't care for their babies. The frogs, the insects, the other fish, they're all going to eat those eggs, humans, etc. So you're going to lose a lot within that, the fry and all that. Well, then you're going to have another bit survive, and then some more survive. But then eventually you're just going to have just a few of those thousands of eggs, only maybe 10 survive. And they reach, very, very few reach maturity. So this graph is off a little bit. This is not zero. Zero is down here. But you get the idea. So the early loss, we're losing a lot early. All right, constant loss. Okay, this is where you're just basically losing equal amounts of individuals at all age. So some of the eggs don't hatch, and then some of the little baby birds fall from the nest, and then some of them get eaten by hawks, and then and some just die of natural causes all the way down here. And then late loss. Okay, these are your K selected. So this would be an R selected, and this would be K selected, right? So K selected, we're caring for the young, we're not getting sick, we're reaching middle age. Most of them reach middle age, and then they start to die, and then they reach kind of a maximum lifespan, and all the old ones die. All right, they care for their young, they do all these sorts of things. So this is where you get the late loss. So you can see based on the graphs where we get the names: early loss, constant loss, and late loss. So in case you're a words person, here you go. Alright, late loss, young survive, so high juvenile survivorship, and usually K-selected species with lots of parental care so that we can make sure that our babies survive. Early loss, you're losing lots of babies. These are your R-selected, and then constant loss. You just slowly decline. Alright, so moving along, now we look at predator-prey relationships. So we said predation can affect population size. Okay, sure. So here's a really famous study that was done from 1845 to 1935. One scientist spent his entire lifetime collecting this data, and this is on the Arctic hare and the lynx. Okay, so we look at population size on the y-axis and year on the x-axis. So you can see over the course of about 80 years or something, 70 years there, whatever it is, actually 90 years, geez, you've got lots of data. Alright, and so if we look at the lynx, okay, when lynx population goes up, hare population goes down. When hare population goes up, eventually lynx population goes up. So you've got this really nice curve here where the predator-prey relationship, when prey is low, predators are low, and vice versa. That makes sense. Okay. So we've got a couple of hypotheses on how these things happen. So if we have top-down control, that means the lynx periodically reduce their population. And that's because shortage of hares leads to fewer lynx, leads to more hares, this leads to more lynx. Top-down control, we're looking at the predator here. The predator is really controlling not only their population, but the population of their prey. So think about it. If there's no hares, there's fewer lynx, more hares, more lynx. Okay. Now if we're looking at it bottom up, we're looking at the prey. The prey controls everything. So here, hares die, food supplies are limited, which shortage of hares means more plants means more hares. More hares means more lynx. It will take you a couple of times to wrap your head around this. Alright, just remember, top down means looking at the predator, bottom up means looking at either the plants or the prey. Okay. So, now into conservation biology. There are three primary principles for conservation biology. First, biodiversity is necessary for all life and should not be reduced by human action. Humans should not cause or hasten the extinction of any species. And the best way to preserve Earth's biodiversity and ecological functions is to protect intact ecosystems that provide sufficient habitat for sustaining natural populations. So these are our three principles for conservation biology. And you can think about it. Do you agree or disagree? Would you add anything? Would you take something away? Would you modify it? Think about it. All right. These are the principles on which we base our conservation biology. So if we need to change them, we should. Alright, so biodiversity is huge and necessary. We should not increase or hasten or cause extinction, and the best way to preserve a species is to leave its natural habitat intact. Alright, think about it. So what can we do if we do not obey these principles? What if we do destroy biodiversity by killing too many things, which of course leads to this one. If we cause too many extinctions, or if we clear cut too many forests, what can happen? Well, we can do all these things. We can restore it, we can rehabilitate it, we can remediate it, we can reclaim it, and we can mitigate it. Keywords in environmental science here. So take a minute, write them down, look them up in the dictionary if you need to, whatever. Alright, restoration. Taking something that's really crappy and restoring it to be something good. Alright, everybody should know what restore means. Rehabilitate, okay, to restore to or rehab something to usable. Okay, celebrities go to rehab because they're crummy, they're burnt out, they can't do anything good. We rehab them so they can do something good. So rehabilitation, to restore something to be good or operable. Remediation is correcting a deficiency. I was an environmental remediator in my previous job, so my job was to go out, figure out where pollution was, and remediate the pollution in order to rehabilitate the environment. See how I used all the big words? Okay. So if pollution is the deficiency and I'm remediating pollution, then I'm getting rid of the pollution. Reclamation. This is converting wasteland into suitable land. Mine land reclamation is something we're going to talk about later when we get to mining. So mine land reclamation is all about taking a mine land, which is obviously destroyed and whatnot, and turning it into something that we can use. And then finally, mitigation, something that we can do to make something less severe. We mitigate the environmental catastrophe. So finally, on our review and critical thinking, all right, these are some things I want you to think about. Which species are in danger of extinction? Don't list, don't Google, okay, what species are endangered. We've got that list, the Endangered Species Act list. So think about it. What environmental conditions will lead to things being extinct? So which species are at the highest risk of going extinct based on what you've learned in this lecture? What's the status of functioning ecosystems? Okay, so where do you think we're at? And what are the ecosystems that are valuable to humans? So if we lose the habitat or the ecosystem, what things are we going to possibly lose as humans? And then what measures can we take to help sustain ecosystems? All right, think about these questions. We'll discuss them in class, and we'll see what you guys come up with. All right, so I hope you learned something, and until next time, I'll see you later.